Hello everyone, welcome back to just another F1 podcast here on the Apex Motorsport and to the start of a brand new season. This is season number 3, it's hard to believe that we're already here, and you may have noticed there's a slight difference this season, the fact that you can actually see myself and my guest today, which of course is Ryan. As always, Ryan, I don't have a race to actually 3 words from, but we've just had testing, so give me a free word summary from testing.
Could Haas win?
That's very bold, getting the bold predictions in right off the bat. It's an interesting one.
Of course it is.
Yeah, they look strong based on pure lap times, but then we know their struggles, and I think we should get the usual caveat out of the way at the very start. It is only testing, and testing means very little because we don't know all the plans and programs the teams can be running, and someone in the comment section, keep a running tally of how many times you say that in this podcast, because there's going to be quite a few. But we're not just going to look at testing, we're going to look at the new season ahead, which starts in just a few days' time. There's very little time between that. I don't even think there's enough time to even watch Drive to Survive in between. But Ryan, we're going to start off by looking at testing. And is it going to be the battle between Mercedes and Red Bull once again this season? There's apparently rumours going around and speculation that Mercedes are the third fastest team this season, which seems to be a little bit hard to believe, but there is some evidence to back it up because they do look like they're genuinely struggling. But Ryan, do you agree with that, or do you think they're just simply sandbagging and they're going to storm the competition this season?
See, I don't know how to feel about that because from pre-season testing so far, we've seen some teams run that C5 tyre and put in sort of a medium fast lap. Now, whether that's because they've backed off at the last second sort of to stretch out their time, because they know exactly where they're going to be, roughly basing their times throughout each sector and being all right, well, if we just roughly add on maybe, or take away, hey, like this much of a second, we're actually sitting where we want to be without letting our competitors know, which is what I feel Mercedes could be doing. However, I do feel that there's some teams like Red Bull who've just went full out there and they've done their run on the C5 tyre and they've shown their pace. Now, whether that's them fully turned up engine modes or not, nobody really knows. A lot of teams were doing high fuel runs and stuff, but I get a feeling that this season we're going to see something a little different. I think it's going to be not so much the battle between Red Bull and Mercedes, but rather Red Bull and Ferrari. So, yeah, it'll be interesting.
Yeah, Ferrari looked like they could be back in the game. I think they sort of went under the radar a little bit during testing. There wasn't too much hype about them, but they were setting the lap times, and they definitely, the people that were really analysing the data, Ferrari looked to be potentially one of the strongest teams, if not the strongest. And I think the way I said Mercedes are the third fastest, many are putting Ferrari and Red Bull above them. But Ryan, just how good would it to see for Ferrari? You know, how nice would it be for them to be right back at the very front with arguably one of the strongest driver pairings in the grid?
For Ferrari to be back at the forefront of the grid, it would be a dream of theirs because they've had a few shaky seasons. Obviously, we had the season where super fast, and then second half when something might have had to have legally changed, they were slow and they were awful, and there was no good team dynamic between Charles and Sebastian, and like their last win before that I think was whenever Kimi was in the team, but that was before obviously they had the big ups and downs in 2019 I think it was, when they might have been cheating. But anyway, for them to be back at the front based on merit, I think it would be quite the spectacle, if that would be the right word for it, for Ferrari and for their Tifosi. I think that Ferrari kind of deserve a fast season because, well, in saying that, there's a chance they'll get a fast season. Everyone will be like, what have they done now? How are they cheating this time? Because they've already had that happen in 2019. So for them to be fast again and actually be fast on merit and put a real shock against Red Bull and Mercedes would be quite interesting. And I think I would actually prefer to see that more this season than have the two main dogs of the last season be at the top. It's time for a change. We want to see something. We want to see some real hard action packed racing this season. We don't want to just see Mercedes run off with it or Red Bull run off with it. We want to see Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull and McLaren and whoever else wants to join in, just close that field up, because I think Ferrari have the edge.
I think what's interesting about this time is obviously we have these new regulation changes, one of the biggest shakes up in recent time. And we know in the last generation of cars, Mercedes dominated, winning every constructors' title available and all but one of the drivers' titles, which obviously was won last year by Max Verstappen. But then before that, you had Red Bull from 2010 through to 2013, who were the best team out there. They had Sebastian Vettel winning all the titles, and they had a car that was definitely one of the best on the grid. And then obviously a year before that, you had Braun. There was a brand new shake up in regulations there, and they won after finding a loophole. And I think going to this season, we all sort of expected Mercedes and Red Bull, and we did as well with our prediction video that we done a few weeks back, that Mercedes and Red Bull were expected to be the very front. There was always the hope that the likes of Ferrari or Alpine or Aston Martin could be up there fighting for points and wins, but I think it's more hope than actual expectation. But what we've seen from Ferrari is all this work that they've put in the past few years, where they've been falling down the grid slowly. Last season they got back up to third, where I think arguably they should be in that fight for the top three in the Constructors' Championship. And this continuity between the driver parent and Leclerc and Sainz going into the season can only mean a good thing for them, because they're putting in these lap times and they had a very good testing program and they could be the quickest. We don't know for sure which team is going to be the fastest, but if we turn up next week to Bahrain and Ferrari are sitting pole position or 1-2 to final come the end of the race, I think that'll get a lot of people talking, and something that I think Formula 1 might just need a little bit of a shake up, because we always had the drama of end of last season between Verstappen and Hamilton, so it would be nice to see. But if we quickly go back to Red Bull, they ended the final day fastest in the short run and the long run pace, so single lap and race pace effectively. So it looks like Red Bull may actually be the fastest car based on that, but that's only from one day of testing. Brian, just if you go put on record now, just as a guess, Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari, which one do you think is going to be fastest in the first race?
The first race, Bahrain, long straights. Well, not long straights, but quite long straights. Mercedes normally are fast straight line speed. However, I do think it's going to be Red Bull, and I don't know why. Mercedes, I think, won it last year. But obviously this year's a different philosophy of car. I don't think Ferrari will have the straight line speed. They've never really had the most utmost straight line speed. I think the Mercedes engine has always been optimised for straight line speed more than rapid through the corners. I want to believe in this new Red Bull powertrains thing. I think they might have done something. So I'm going to gamble. Obviously, I don't know if we're not really lifting hard on the predictions already, are we?
No.
We're starting that competition already this year.
But we'll get into that a little bit later on.
I think I might just hedge my bet on Red Bull possibly winning that first race of the season.
Yeah, I'm torn between Red Bull and Ferrari. I think that although Mercedes in the past, everyone's been called out by them sandbagging, I think this year they do have some issues, and I do think they'll be able to sort them out within the first few races, but given the limited time between Bahrain testing and Bahrain Grand Prix, it's not enough in order to rebuild a car. And of course, I think there's rules put in place that as soon as these cars start, they're homologated. I think that's where I can't really pronounce it that well, but they can only change certain parts over the season, and that may cost teams. They may have to gamble between now and from using stuff from the first test, the second test, to just build a car that they think is the fastest, and it might not be the fastest around all circuits, but I'm gonna go. You've went for Red Bull, so I'm gonna go for Ferrari to hope there'll be something to spice up the very first race of the season, because to see Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc in the top step of the podium, I think is what Formula One needs right now, to start these new regulations, to keep fans engaged that are tuning in because of these new changes, that anyone can win. There's no better way for Formula One to market that than to get a race winner that's not Lewis Hamilton or a Max Verstappen. Talking about Lewis Hamilton, he has announced that he will be incorporating his mother's name into his own name, his mother's surname. But Ryan, I'm struggling to pronounce how to say that, to say this. Can you have a hazard a guess of how it's meant to be pronounced? I think it's Labarlister. Labarlister. I think that's how you say it. It's going to be his middle name. He's not having a double barrel surname that many people thought when the news just broke. It's a nice touch from Hamilton. He's obviously very proud of his mother's side of the family. Of course, he carries the Hamilton name. He does that with pride. So I think it'll be nice for him to have that. And he'll still be known as Sir Lewis Hamilton, but this will be part of his name on official documents and stuff. And it's something that he feels like he needs to do, something that's special to him. But going back to testing and to the cars itself, I feel like this year it's very much going to get a feel of UK versus the world. And I think that's because you're going to see Hamilton, George Russell and Lando Norris all fighting at the very front. McLaren, first test, Barcelona, they look to be the strongest team. They look to be the fastest team out there. But then, of course, Daniel Ricciardo caught COVID-19 and wasn't able to test in Bahrain. Norris had to do the entire test, which I'm sure was very tiring for him. Fatigue probably played a key factor. He did complete the most laps out of anyone, but I think McLaren themselves had the least amount of laps of anyone because they only had one driver doing the entire running. But Ryan, we'll start with McLaren. Do you think they'll be able to go back to the Barcelona style form with Ricciardo back in the team, or do you think with Ricciardo missing out, not getting that testing time, it's going to take the team a few rounds to get into the groove going into the season?
I think for Daniel, this is probably the worst thing that can happen to him, because obviously he came into the team McLaren last year and he was obviously not completely comfortable with the car because Lando was obviously miles above him in terms of the overall handling of the car. He was able to extract the fastest speeds, the most agility through the corners. He was just able to beat him consistently throughout the season. Obviously, apart from that, the race at Monza or Imola, I'm gonna
Monza.
get in trouble for getting that wrong. What'd you say?
Monza.
Monza, yeah, the 1-2 finish. But obviously, Lando, if he wanted to, could have passed, but then that would have been disobeying the team orders. Haha.
Yeah.
Keep the team happy. I do think after that sort of summer break, Daniel did start to claw back a bit and gain a bit more confidence with the car. And so now obviously they're back. Completely new car. It would have been a level playing field, but yet again Lando has now had more time in that car. Will that leave Daniel back on the back foot again? More than likely, yes, unless he can pull out something spectacular, because obviously he's had to adapt to 3 different cars in the last, 4 seasons, is it? 4? Yeah. I keep forgetting that he was at Red Bull at like 2018, wasn't it?
Yeah, because 21 was McLaren, 2 years Renault. Yeah.
It's crazy to think that it wasn't that long ago. It feels like he left that team in like 2016, but it wasn't.
Yeah, it does.
It was quite recent.
No.
And by well, obviously recent is still like 4 years ago, but
yeah,
recent enough.
Yeah.
Where was I going with that? I can't even remember.
Just meant McLaren this year. Do you think they'll be fighting for a podium come Bahrain, or do you think that they may be 4th, 5th fastest team?
No, they're not. They don't seem to have that same promise about them that I see in Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes. It's funny, I keep saying has, but I do feel like they've something stupid up their sleeves. Obviously, it's just not. They're not gonna be anywhere near. They're not going to be anywhere near as bad as last season, but I don't think they're going to have that big of an improvement. Obviously, they spent a full season working on that car because they didn't develop their car last season at all. So I can see them possibly, because Williams don't seem to look the strongest, I can actually see Haas being above both the Williams and the Alfa Romeo, and possibly challenging with the Aston Martin, depending on how the Aston Martin performs. The Aston Martin.
Yeah, but it will be interesting to see. I think with Haas, obviously we know Nikita Mazepin was dropped by the team, the Euro Cali sponsorship. Kevin Magnussen is back. I was almost about to. I was about to say Marcus Ericsson. Don't know why, but it is Kevin Magnussen.
I think Ericsson hit us.
Ericsson made some very interesting comments to Twitter as well, saying that Magnussen, when he tested in IndyCar, was the slowest driver. Yeah, he's come back into Formula 1 and went fastest, and it just shows you how more competitive IndyCar is, which is an interesting discussion to have, but you have to look at the track conditions and the time of day and the fact that Magnussen had the entire track to himself when he set that lap. That was, I think, potentially as a way to get...
Hold on. What about Romain Grosjean then?
Very true.
You know, he's up there. He's challenging for wins. Like,
yeah.
There is a difference, but I think he might have forgotten that Romain also left that team.
Yeah. But no, with Kevin Magnussen, I think that was a lap that was really to get sponsorship on board, to get people excited and to show a bit of interest in Haas, because they're in a point where they may actually need it. But to go back to our UK versus the world point, Ryan, Norris, Hamilton, Russell versus Verstappen, Leclerc, Sainz, Perez and Ricciardo. There's sort of the bunch of drivers to be fighting at the very front. Do you agree with that, or do you think that between the UK drivers they could be working together, especially Hamilton and Russell? But Norris, we know he is good friends with Max Verstappen, but he also has a lot of respect for the other British drivers on the grid. Do you think that, you know, teammates might be one thing, but allegiances to Team GB and Team Europe and the rest of the world might be a different thing?
I don't think that's really gonna be a big factor, because obviously every team's gonna fight for themselves, every driver fights for themselves. Even with George and Lewis, yes, they're going to have to work together, but I don't think it's gonna be a case of, oh, all the British drivers, this was a British sport, haha, we're now, this, that and the other. I don't think that there's a British bias like we see in the likes of the Premier League and footballs. Because in football, in a team, there might be 5 or 6, England players, Scottish players, Welsh players, but they're all UK or so-and-so, and they all sort of bunch up, and then it's I'm not going to say foreign, but the national or the I don't know what word I'm supposed to use without being offensive, but the country's not a part of the United Kingdom, pretty much is what I'm getting at. Like, they have their own little separate group. So I know what you mean, but I don't feel that's it in this sport, because it's a one person sport. It's every person for themselves.
We know that as well. The end of last season is still left sour taste in the mouth of most Formula 1 fans, with Hamilton looked like he was denied a title one. Verstappen won it based on a decision by Michael Massey, who no longer has the race director job in Formula 1. And the tension between Red Bull and Mercedes, I think, is still there. And I think that's something that will take quite a while to blow over. We know that Mercedes turned up to Bahrain with one of the most incredible designs of a car, where they basically had no side pods whatsoever, and this, I think, was the move that is the revolutionary move that the one team does every regulation change. But Red Bull were very quick. Well, Christian Horner has denied all of this. There was quotes that come out very early on in the test to say that Red Bull were going to appeal it, it was illegal. Christian Horner's gone on record in the press conference to say that, yeah, it's totally legal. They're a very, very talented bunch of designers, engineers. But Ryan, do you think that between this season, any team that has somewhat of an advantage. All the other teams that aren't supplied by their engine, who don't have that team's engines in the car, will be out to try to close every loophole possible, for the sake of the sport, for them, not every team having to adopt this new style because it's the fastest, but for the sake of the competition, that they know that if we can stop one team doing one thing that puts them 2-3 seconds a lap quicker, that will benefit us in our hunt to get points, race wins, podiums, whatever.
The manufacturer battle you're talking about, it is a thing. It happens. We've seen it before. We've seen that Red Bull really didn't want to have to use a Renault engine ever again. And I'm pretty sure at that time, whenever it was being talked about, Cyril Abiteboul was still at Renault, and he was like, maybe we take them. I wouldn't really want to, but maybe we could. And then it would just sort of, obviously, Red Bull powertrains became alive. So I think having some sort of, how do I put this? I think that the teams having their own ways of trying to nitpick at the other teams really early on in the season. It's not so much your car's faster, what can we find that you've done different, and we're going to appeal it to make it seem like it shouldn't be there, or just to make sure it is legal. And I think it's not so much performance advantage. I think they're trying to get mind games going early on to make other teams think, well, if this team's doing that and we appeal it and we were right, that means other teams are going to leech off of us, and we're going to all have a go at whatever team is being successful. But then it's just going to fall through, because if every team has their own niche idea this season and has their own little tips and tricks, I think everyone's just going to sort of half hold back, because then they could get theirs appealed against. I don't know how it's going to play out. Obviously, we've seen it last season. Sorry, the season before we had Das. Now, Das was not good. Oh, I hate that pun. It's so bad. But, we've seen that happen, and it got appealed, but funny enough, it was a legal system, and they just had to not use it. I say this season, but the season that just ended, it's confusing when you're going into a new season and you can't see this season because the last season just finished. Yes, I'm going to stop talking now. And but yeah, back to the point. Having sort of the teams argue amongst each other about different things, it sort of creates a bit of attention, drama, everything Netflix loves. And it's good to see, because it challenges the other teams that if they are on the wrong, they find a new way and a better way and a stronger way and a faster way, just to make everything better. It's crazy. Yeah. Formula 1's awesome.
And one thing that we have seen, and one of the big reasons these new regulations were brought in, was to help cars follow each other better, and it seems to have worked. I think one thing that was done was the cars were falling right to the rear wing of the other car, and there was obviously turbulence there, but that's expected, but it wasn't as bad, and they were able to follow quite comfortably. But one thing that was not necessarily a concern, but one thing that was noted by most teams, was that slipstreaming is very much not a thing this year. It's going to be very difficult, and they're going to be heavily reliant on DRS to overtake, but I think that balances out with the cars being able to follow better, which will hopefully create some better racing. But Ryan, I'm slightly disappointed that slipstreaming isn't going to be a big thing, because we all know it's one of the highlights, the Northwest 200 road races, where you see them go down the straights, side by side, 3 wide, 4 wide, all in the bow of the slipstream. We're not going to see that. Ryan, you disappointed we'll not get to see some Northwest 200 drag race style in Formula 1 this year?
Obviously, I like the bikes, and the Northwest is less than 54 days. I can't wait. And that's probably one of the most interesting things. They're like doing nearly sub 200 mile an hour on an A road, or it's just about an A road, 2 lanes, and they're just flying, and then one person sits behind the other, and they're going over bumps and everything, and the slipstream's just there, and they're just going faster and faster, and they just, next thing, boom, straight past. And that's because they're punching a hole in the air. Now obviously the new cars and the new regulations is to reduce sort of to increase the hole that's being punched, so that the car can sort of follow easier, but it also means less dirty air that comes off when they're just behind. Outside of that clear air slipstream gap, it's a weird one. They're making it easier to follow, but they're not essentially making it easier to overtake. But in a way, they still are because they're able to catch up better. It's confusing how they're doing it, why they're doing it. Interesting. I forgot where I'm going with this.
Yeah,
but
we'll move straight on to our predictions. I think now. We're gonna actually keep count better this year. Still trying to work out who won last year, but I think for now we'll call it a draw because there was 22 races, 22 predictions, and between me moving back and forth, houses, pieces of paper kept getting lost and misplaced. And if someone wants to do the maths for us, you're more than welcome to, but we'll call it a draw for now, but we will someday get round to it. But we are going to keep track this year. So Ryan, we'll start off by, it's a standard weekend for free practice sessions qualifying, and the Grand Prix sprint races come into a few races into the season. But Ryan, your first pole position sitter of the new era in Formula 1.
I want to be basic, but I don't. But I kind of want points. But I kind of want to be risky. I'll just keep it short, sweet, and simple. I'm just going to say Max Verstappen.
Okay.
I know I'm going to regret that, but Max Verstappen.
I'm going to go for George Russell.
Oh.
Because we haven't
I forgot Georgie boy was back up in the Mercedes.
I feel like we've done enough over the past 2 years to hype him up. We're almost 2 years at Apex as well. We're nearly to hype him up as a great driver, and I feel like he for the sake of our credibility, I think he needs to go out and be very strong this year and potentially win the World Championship. I feel like this year we're going to have to be a lot more sensible with our predictions because we're actually going to keep track of these properly, and we can't just say that Sebastian Vettel's going to win every race or Charles Leclerc is going to get fastest lap as we have done in the past. It may still be possible if you think that's going to happen. But Ryan, your first Grand Prix winner of the season.
I get a feeling it's going to be a Ferrari, but I don't think so.
This is where you predict Charles Leclerc and just disregard everything I just said about 20 seconds ago.
Yeah, I know. I know.
It's possible. They are looking very, very strong. And many say that they are the fastest team.
I'm just going to go back to my point that I said earlier. They don't have straight line speed. I'm going to keep it with where I think it's going to go, and I think it's going to go Verstappen, but I hope it doesn't because apparently there's a winner's curse that the person who wins the first race of the season finishes P2 in the Drivers' Championship. So,
yep, because Bottas for a few seasons, I know Hamilton last season.
So, I'm going to say Verstappen, but I'm not meaning that. I just think he might get it.
Okay, for tactical points, put it that way. It's usually the first race of the season that I predict Valtteri Bottas to win, but don't quite think that's going to happen this year. I'm going to go Lewis Hamilton because I think he's got a point to prove. He'll be out, he's fired up to get his 8th title, and we'll really want to go out and win this title, the record-breaking 8th title. Ryan, very quickly, your podium, who will be joining Verstappen on the second and third steps?
Okay, I'm going to go Verstappen.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm going to go... I think he might have a better grip on the car. Carlos Sainz.
Yes.
And I think it's going to be a double Red Bull podium. I think it's going to be Sergio Perez.
Okay. I'm going to go for Russell and Verstappen.
Nice.
Fastest lap. Who do you think will take that?
I definitely think it's going to be a Mercedes. Is this the fastest lap of the race or... Yeah?
The race.
Yeah, Mercedes. George Russell.
Right, I'm going to be... I think we'll put this in record at the very start. Fastest lap is the driver who sets the fastest lap in the race, not necessarily gets fastest lap point. because if you don't finish in top 10, you don't get that
That's
point.
true.
So
Just
I am
the
going to go
overall
for Kevin
fastest lap.
Magnussen. Yeah, I'm going to go for Kevin Magnussen.
You think they're gonna
Because-
do some special magic?
You said all podcasts that they could actually win this title, so
Well, I didn't say they could win the title. I said they could be surprisingly really good.
okay. Your wildcard prediction for this race?
Oh man. Oh, I'm gonna have to leave that back in the last season. Oh, that's sad.
Yeah.
Wild card. Let's see. Yuki Tsunoda,
Okay,
top 7.
interesting. I'm going to go for a Bottas top 7 finish. Why not? Be bold. So Ryan, this is where we usually go for how many times will Mazda spin in the
And
race.
usually you ask me for my final thoughts and words, and I've got nothing. I'm gonna have to come up with something.
Can't,
I have to come up with something.
We'll think of something for the next podcast.
We'll see what happens at the first race of the season.
Yes. Yeah, so any driver who spins, good luck to you this season, because
Yep.
Ryan will be guessing how many times he spin every single race.
Yes.
But yeah, that's going to bring this first podcast of the season to a close. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me again for this one. 23 races this season, at least. And then we'll hopefully have one at the end of the season as well. So it could be up to 25 or more podcasts this season in just an F1 podcast. So that's going to be quite exciting. A lot of work for us, but we thoroughly enjoy making these videos. And we hope that you enjoy them as well. And if you're listening to this on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts from, why not head over to the YouTube channel, check it out. Maybe give us a subscribe if you do enjoy the content we create. There's team guide videos going up across the entirety of this week. I think there's 2 a day, potentially 3 a day this week. So a lot of work going into those. And of course you can actually see us in person if you're listening. Not if you really want to, but of course the audio form is there for that purpose. But yeah, I said, Ryan, thank you for joining for this one. Thank you all so much for watching / listening wherever you are. And why not head over to the website, apexmotorsport.com, check out loads more from the world of motorsport. And yeah, I hope you all join us in the next one. Goodbye.